The Collapse video series is for entertainment purposes only. Do not commit acts of violence. "6 weeks since the grid went down. Small gangs of marauders have reached the edges of rural towns. The smaller gangs travel faster than the larger ones. The rural towns have been engaging in surveillance and militia training, but it's only been a few weeks since they started getting ready. Those who have some experienced military among their ranks are better prepared than others. Sadly, there are a number of rural towns that couldn't get organized and trained in time. The marauders selected unprotected homesteads on the outskirts of town. They terrorized and killed the occupants before slaughtering their chickens and cows for meat. Other towns were more ready. They have scouts and patrols that detected the approaching marauders. The rural militias ask no questions and take no prisoners. The marauders are taken out in a hail of gunfire. Everyone knows the gangs they just took out were small. This is only the beginning. More will come. They step up their training and surveillance. This will take resources away from farming, hunting, and fishing, but it must be done. Trouble is coming." Despite the die-off from starvation, the typhoid fever epidemic continues to slowly spread through water tainted by the sewage of infected people relieving themselves too close to a water source. They are sick with fever, headache, abdominal pain, loss of appetite, dry cough, and diarrhea or constipation. With the sewer systems not working and people unfamiliar with sanitation practices that don't involve a sewage system, transmission has been continuing. As the suburbanites migrated, they unintentionally tainted the water of any town they passed upriver. Even with the suburbanites gone now, the disease persists in the rural towns. Sanitation isn't something that's nice to have, it is a necessity. Without proper sanitation, people get sick and die. The illness is caused by the Salmonella typhi bacteria. Normally, it is treated with antibiotics, but those have become difficult to acquire. The only treatment now is supportive care, keeping the patient hydrated, fed if he'll eat, warm and clean. Without antibiotics, the fatality rate is 20%. The focus is on prevention. Doctors train sanitation advisors who educate the public to dig a hole at least 200 feet from anyone's water source. In Washington, D.C., where the power is back on in government buildings, the poorer people of the city were being given perishable foods while they lasted, since the government couldn't quickly use all of the perishable foods it had the military collect. Those are now all gone or have gone bad. The poor neighborhoods have been out of food for over a week. They demonstrate to demand food. They have frequently accused the government of not caring about them in the past. This time, it's actually true. With everything that's happening in the country, saving the inner city poor of DC is not high on the priority list. The police confine them to their neighborhoods. The poor realize their demonstrations are being ignored and they may starve to death. They riot. The police open fire into the crowd to push them back. Normally, that would demoralize the police. However, most of the police force have performed duties with the military outside the perimeter of Washington, D.C. over the past few weeks. They know how bad things are out there. They know the government is keeping their children safe and fed on a military base. They comply with the orders to keep their children where they are. The people of the poor neighborhoods slowly return to their homes defeated. They are sectioned off in those neighborhoods with no food. European officials noticed that the number of cyber attacks against its electric grid have markedly increased. They wonder if this is the same group who attacked the grid in the US, or is this a completely different group? One thing is for sure, it is not the work of a small number of ragtag malcontents. These cyber attacks are sophisticated and require many highly trained technicians working together full-time with the right equipment. That costs money. This is the work of another government. It is believed that the attacks are coming from Russia, but it is not certain. Iran is also suspected, as is North Korea. The protector quietly allocates resources to fight the cyber attacks, classifying the operation. He thinks it is best if the public does not know this is happening. In Britain, the government has failed to bring the unemployment rate below 15%. The government has been providing bailout money to banks, businesses, and individuals, but the people have been hesitant to spend the money. They are feeling rather alone as a nation without their alliances with the US and Canada, and with their relatively recent separation from the European Union. They don't know what this collapse will mean to Britain going forward. Without that confidence in the economy, they are saving the money the government sent them instead of going out and spending it in shops and restaurants. The lack of spending prevents businesses from recovering. They continue to lay off employees, which keeps the unemployment rate high. The demands of a segment of a population to rejoin the European Union have increased in volume. Meanwhile, immigrants who have been in the country unlawfully and had been working under the table have not been receiving any of the government subsidies after they lost their jobs. The increase in the price of food due to global stockpiling hits them hard. There is sporadic theft of food from rural areas by illegal aliens who reside in the city. Off the coast of Taiwan, Chinese ships engaging in the blockade of Taiwan come within 5 miles of Yonaguni Island, the westernmost island of Japan. While Japan has decided to mostly pull back since the collapse and see how the global power dynamics shift before the nation steps in, the violation of their ocean territory cannot go ignored. The Japanese Navy fires warning shots across the bow of the Chinese ships. The message is received. China does not want a war with Japan. It steers clear of Japanese waters going forward. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Iran decides to seize the opportunity afforded by the absence of the US military. It invades the Strait of Hormuz to take complete control. Over 20% of the world's oil passes through that strait, which runs along the coast of Iran. On the other side of the strait is Oman. Iran seizes the section of land along the narrowest point of the strait. Oman knows its military is inferior to Iran's and decides not to retaliate. Iran begins charging a tax of 10% for anything going through the strait. Saudi Arabia is furious. A large number of their ships and their oil pass through that strait. Iran's move is unacceptable. It announces Saudi ships will not pay the tax. It sends military ships to confront Iran's in the strait. The two countries engage in a limited war in and around the Strait of Hormuz. Neither country attacks the other's home country directly, not yet. The price of oil skyrockets. Nothing can get through the Strait of Hormuz while the war between Saudi Arabia and Iran is underway. The oil from the United States and Canada has ceased. Russia, another of the world's largest oil producers, dramatically increases its prices. Less developed countries that were already hurting from the global economic collapse now find that moving goods around in poor nations becomes extremely expensive, increasing the prices of everything, including food. Sometimes the price is too high and the trucks don't move. All of the negotiations the protector had done to lower the price of gasoline were for nothing, only a short-lived drop in price for a few weeks. In sub-Saharan Africa, the food crisis is reaching a fever pitch. Food riots in the cities are becoming common. Starving refugees pour into neighboring countries. The governments do not have the manpower to secure the border. They never did. Even countries that had been food secure, producing enough for their own people, are now in crisis due to the influx of people from food insecure nations. Desperate refugees steal food when it is not given to them. Farmers attempting to guard their crops are killed. The conflict interferes with food production, exacerbating the problem. The nation of Panama, experiencing economic hardship like the rest of the world, begins charging 2% of a ship's cargo to pass through. They don't want cash, they want the goods, especially the food. One of the world's largest food producers is Brazil. Its ships pass through the Panama Canal on their way to China, Japan, Korea, and elsewhere in Asia. Brazilian officials are furious over the new surcharge and debate whether to send military intervention. But before they can make a decision, the U.S. military intervenes. The interior of the United States may be in the middle of a disaster, but the Navy ships and the Marines are still as capable as they ever were. They seize the canal. The U.S. military then begins charging a 5% fee to allow ships to pass through. This ensures that not only does the U.S. Navy and the Marines get enough food, but so does the rest of the U.S. military and the federal government in Washington, D.C. If you would like to see an ad-free version of these videos, go to my BitChute or Brighteon page. Even with the ads, there is not nearly enough revenue to support continued production of the series. Please consider supporting me on Subscribestar or click on the PayPal link in the description.